Hello, everyone. This is Lisa from Power Wheelchairs for Success. And today I just wanted to ramble, I guess, a little bit about our health in general and using a wheelchair long term or for the rest of our lives, despite our age. Because many times I've said, using a wheelchair has nothing to do with age. So wheelchairs are not specifically designed for the elderly only. So even children use wheelchairs, either because a defect they were born with, or an illness, or an accident. Wheelchairs are just, in general for a population who needs it, basically. However, they have done some studies. This is coming out of the medical press. This is for gerontology and geriatrics. So it was an assessment they did for the elderly, stating that using a wheelchair offers a substantially reduced risk of fractures for the frail and the elderly. Well, I would say almost duh. So, because they're using a wheelchair. However, in general, we know that those of us who use wheelchairs long term, there are some things that we need to keep in mind, especially for those, not especially, but for those who use manual wheelchairs. You have the risks of carpal tunnel, and you have the risks of the rotator cuffs in your shoulders because of the constant propelling. So that is constant. There is therapy and things you can do to improve the pain. However, that is a risk of using manual wheelchairs. And I think that in general, and I've said this before, I think the manual wheelchairs are going to start to look more like the power wheelchairs. And I think the power wheelchairs are going to start looking more like the manual wheelchairs. So I think there's going to be a blend of the two, and it's going to be the best case scenario. When I look at all the diversity that's been happening to manual wheelchairs and the diversity and changes that's been happening for power wheelchairs, I think we're going to find a new style, a new form of wheelchair that's going to help all of us in the long run. So for those who are having problems with the rotator cuffs or, other injuries, they're probably going to switch over gradually to something that's more or has more power to it. And those of us who use power wheelchairs already, we might be switched over at some point to a power wheelchair that is much lighter and easier to transport. So I'm seeing all these changes, in statements in terms of, reduce risk of fractures for the elderly if they do use a wheelchair. And certainly in my case, I'm not an elder person. However, because of dysfunction in my muscles, using a wheelchair prevents me from and reduces the amount of times that I fall. And the high risk that I'm at, in hitting my head or fracturing something. So, here in the report, it says comprising 55,442 wheelchair users in Sweden with an average age of 83 years of age. So this is the older population. This is the largest study in the research area to date. 6 of 10 participants were women. People in the matched control group were ambulatory, able to walk about, with or without technical aids. The median follow-up period was approximately 2 years. So the wheelchair users suffered 4,148 fractures, fewer than half of the control group's 10,344. More precisely, the control's risk was equivalent to 2.3 times the wheelchair users. This was for fractures in general. So it goes on to talk about, all the reduction in risk of fractures for those who use wheelchairs in the elderly population. I think it is the same for us in the younger age bracket because we are well trained on transferring and all those things, and we really don't want to fall. It's a very vulnerable place to be, as you probably know if you've fallen or fallen with someone, because that can happen too. But I think that the mechanics of wheelchairs is rapidly changing, and it's going to help us in so many areas. I've just been watching videos on wheelchairs and new wheelchairs that are coming out, and organizations that are working on adapting wheelchairs so that we don't have to use our hands anymore to propel. We use our balance. It might not be for everybody because some people don't have the core strength. But for those of us who do, they'll be able to use the ones that are with the Segway type style wheelchairs. And so it just amazes me in terms of where we're going. The only thing that it doesn't talk about much, and this was based on fractures and the use of wheelchairs, but I think, other risks that we have in terms of circulation, which we still have to do exercises and things to make sure that we are eating well and making sure that we do things that are healthy for us to keep that circulation going and to reduce plaque and anything else we can do to keep ourselves in the up and up in terms of our health and our long-term use of wheelchairs. So I think that health-wise, in terms of the rotator cuff issues and the carpal tunnel problems, I think that's going to go away soon. I would give it maybe 5 years because I think that all of the wheelchairs that I'm looking at and all the research that's being done and the big changes that are being made to wheelchairs, you have the Omeo, which the Omeo right now is not considered a medical wheelchair, but I could see it happening soon, that the Omeo would be labeled as for medical wheelchair use or labeled as a medical wheelchair. So if I could say it better than that. So the Omeo is one that uses a Segway style, but probably the medical field might want it to be a little bit more encompassing in terms of armrests and things like that, for them to label it as for medical use. But they're also developing another type of wheelchair that sits on a ball. It looks like a bowling ball, and they've put some rubber around the ball so that, it has some flexibility around the floor, and it doesn't slide or slip. So, that's being tested, and they might have a prototype by next year. So it's some of that and all of that I think the manual wheelchair is going to go through a transformation, and the power wheelchairs are going to go through some transformations that is really going to impact our health in positive ways. So stay tuned to that. I might be developing yet another series on updates on experimental wheelchairs that are being put out there, because I read and I get a lot of emails and updates on these things. So, and it's amazing. It's amazing how these things are born. It's amazing the people who are participating and how they got involved, and just the story behind it is incredible. So I think that in the next 5 years, we're going to see some incredible changes, which the wheelchair hasn't gone through a whole lot of changes. we put a motor on it. Big deal, but it still has the same shape. So in the manual wheelchair, hasn't gone through much change at all either. So we shall see what transpires very soon. I could see us, again, I could see the manual wheelchair starting to look like the power wheelchairs, and the power wheelchairs starting to look more like the manual wheelchairs, and we're going to end up with something that's lightweight and mobile. We don't have to use our arms anymore, and I could see one segment, as a Segway, and another one as just a motorized, lightweight power wheelchair. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. And I will keep you all posted. I will think about designing another series to see if we can, and I can bring this information to you so you can have access in terms of all the new things that are coming about with wheelchairs. All right, before I ramble any further, I'll leave it at that, and I'll see you in the next one.